The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Are we recording? We're live? Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is the City of Plant City Planning Board meeting of Wednesday, April 14th, 2021. So thank you all for being here. First order of business, because I remember this month, I did get a reminder, so because I kept forgetting. We will do roll call because this is a hybrid meeting. There may be some people that are attending remotely. So Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Wood,
Here.
Board Member Burris, Board Member Burris,
Here.
thank you. Board Member Carr. Present. Board Member Driggers. Board Member Driggers. Board Member Thurston.
Here.
Board Member Rodwell. Board Member Rodwell. Board Member Jones.
Here. That's everyone? And to clarify, had either Mr. Driggers or Mr. Rodwell notified you that they intended to either skip the meeting or attend remotely? Did you hear from either one?
Did not hear from Mr. Triggers.
At all?
Mr. Rodwell can let us know that he may not be here today.
Okay. So we have a quorum present, so we can proceed with business. First order of business is approval of the minutes. They were distributed previously. This is our March 24th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Move for approval of the minutes of March 24th.
We have a motion by Bonnie Carr for approval. Is there a second?
I'll make a second.
Okay, we have a second. For the record, we'll note that as Mr. Jones, but thank you, Mr. Burris.
Yes, sir.
Any discussion of the motion? We'll call for a clerk. I'll call for a vote. Madam Clerk?
Board Member Wood,
Yes.
Board Member Burris,
Yes.
Board Member Carr,
Yes.
Board Member Thurston,
Yes.
Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. There's an opportunity now for public comment, and Madam Clerk, do I understand no one is phoned in for a public comment?
That is correct, no one.
Is there anyone present that would like to make a public comment? I'll ask a second time. Anyone present to make a public comment? Thank you. That closes public comment. We'll begin the public hearings, and we'll begin with a swearing in of staff and speakers. Madam Clerk, would you conduct? Please stand, raise your right hand. Yeah.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. First item is a continuation. This is of the Park Square Planned Development Modification, PB 2021-06. Chair recognizes Ms. Baker. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Robin Baker, Senior Planner of the Planning and Zoning Division, and I have been sworn in. You've already seen this presentation, so I'm going to move through it quickly just to refresh your memory.
That was exactly my suggestion.
And then when we get to the slide that, brought us back here today, then we can stop there and discuss. So this is PB 2021-06 for the Park Square PD modification. The site is located on the west side of Park Road, east of Maryland Avenue and south of East Sam Allen Road. The original PD was approved in 2006 as a mixed-use project for 180 townhomes and 5,000 square feet of commercial. And with this request, this is a copy of the PD plan itself. With this request, they are asking to change the name just to adhere to the code requirement that we change all community unit districts to planned development districts. They are changing the residential use to apartments instead of townhomes and increasing the allowable units from 180 to 340. They do have a companion comprehensive plan amendment that is going through currently that, if approved, would allow the amount of units they're requesting. But otherwise, currently the property is commercial on the front, R6 on the back. They are requesting an increase in the requested commercial square footage, originally approved for 5,000 square feet. They are increasing that request to 17,227 square feet, just solely based on the allowable 0.35 FAR. They're doing an overall change in site layout to accommodate the new building type and increase the amenities on site. So this is the graphic that the board had requested to see, basically wanting to see the layout of the parking and the drive aisles. Previously on the site plan, you'll see those dark bold labels that say ingress, egress. Those are still a part of the PD plan today. I guess it's important to note that this is just an exhibit that was submitted. This is not the new PD plan. It is just an exhibit to show you how those ingress, egress lines line up with where the parking and the drive aisles are. So as you can see, that parking pretty much hugs those ingress, egress lines all the way around. There is still quite a bit of open space in between the buildings and the center around the lake, and some on the outskirts. Now, some of that open space is not going to be usable because it's wetland areas that are depicted there. But they are still showing the dog park on the north side, as well as some amenities inside. I believe the applicant's presentation today will show you a little bit more of what those recreation areas may look like to help your decision on that process. These were the renderings that were submitted to show the potential look of the apartment buildings themselves. And then the graphic renderings that show the 3-story versus the 4-story option.
Yeah, it will be the 3-story that's going to be on the property.
Well, the way that the PD is approved is based just solely on the allowed height. They are allowed a height of 65 feet. There's nothing that specifically limits the stories of the buildings. So it could be either or of these. The way that the renderings were submitted, the 4-story building was specifically to accommodate the clubhouse on the bottom
Right,
floor.
right.
And I'll let the applicant speak to what they don't plan to do, but at this point, they could do either.
They could, okay.
Drawings and the elevations and everything, that's part of it. Or is that just
It's part of the record. It's not listed on the PD itself.
it's not part of the actual, that it be substantially similar to the drawings that you submit?
Correct. The drawings are required per the PD code of, the code of ordinances.
Okay.
And so I think in past approvals, we've referenced those graphics in the ordinance of approval once it goes to the city commission. But generally, they are not attached or shown on the site plan itself. But it's possibly something that could be done if needed. So this is another slide we added based on some other changes that weren't mentioned before, but they were minor changes, just some removal of outdated notes, such as the townhouse standards. Obviously, if they're not doing the townhouses, we don't need those standards on there, as well as some requirements that were originally put on the plan because of a Walmart that was going across the street. Now that Walmart is not going to go there, so they're not needed. We did add some notes from EPC and for the traffic study requiring the turn lane requirements. And that study was conducted as part of the PD review process. And that report determined that a right turn lane was warranted along Park Road. That is a Hillsborough County maintained road and would have to be approved through the process with Hillsborough County. But as far as the transportation study that we required, that was what was deemed necessary. As you know, there is a waiver, a specific approval request for the distance between buildings to be reduced from 40 to 30 feet. This is a requirement that is specific to the PD regulations in our code. I think it's important to note that if this were an R2 zoning category, this wouldn't be an issue because in the R2 category, they're only required to have 20 feet between buildings. This is a specific requirement for the PD's plan developments within the city that they're required to have the 40 feet between buildings. And as we mentioned before, this is not for every building. This is only for about 5 of the buildings shown on the site plan. There's a total of 12 buildings shown and 5 of them would need that reduced distance. This is a close-up view of the PD again, just to refresh your memory. And as you can see, just to point out one more time, as we're talking about that exhibit that shows the parking, these ingress egress labels are still shown on the PD plan, just not the actual parking spaces or bubbles themselves. We had gone over the positive and negatives previously, and our staff recommendation is that the planning board find the modification to the Park Square plan development and the specific approvals requested be found consistent with Article 4, Division 8 of Chapter 102, zoning of the Plant City Code of Ordinances, and the Imagine 2040 Plant City Comprehensive Plan, subject to that comprehensive plan amendment being approved, and for it to be forwarded to the City Commission with a recommendation of approval. I'm here if you have any questions. I believe the applicant has a presentation for you as well.
Any questions for Ms. Baker? Yes. Bonnie Carr?
Just curious, how do you drive through? Is it the white line, solid line that's going through, or do you drive through the parking areas?
Can you tell me which graphic you're looking at?
I'm looking at this one.
Okay, so it's going to be those gray areas.
So you just drive through the parking areas.
Those drive aisles will be required to be 24 feet wide to allow 2 cars to pass, and then the parking would be on each side.
Oh.
Any other questions?
I guess not.
Okay.
Thank you. Will the applicant come forward? Mr. Burrs, can you still hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I think, yes, we are. In fact, we're hearing a little too much. Man,
Okay.
maybe you could put
I'll
your
mute.
phone on mute. You could go on mute
Absolutely.
when you-
Yes,
not
sir.
speaking. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Would you please identify yourself, name and address, state for the record that you've been sworn in?
Hi, good morning. Linda Stewart with Morris Engineering, 6997 Professional Parkway, Sarasota, Florida, representing the applicant, Mr. Todd Taylor. And yes, I have been sworn.
You got it all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are here as a, coming back to explain a little bit about the open space and our parking and our ingress and egress for you on the development. So we created a more visual exhibit for you with this exhibit. I've highlighted the recreational areas on here because I know you guys were concerned that when we showed the parking and our drive aisles that we may infringe upon any recreational areas that we were creating within the development. So as you can see, we still have large recreational areas to provide for the amenities for the residents of the development. And the ingress and egress is shown coming off of North Park and traversing around the development. The ingress and egress attached over on the western portion on North Maryland is for emergency access only. That is not an access for the residents of the development. The special request is to reduce the setbacks between 5 of the 12 buildings only. The average distance between the 12 buildings on the development is 54 feet. The requirement for the open space within the overall PD development is 35%, which we do meet. And it allows for a greater distance for the apartment buildings to the adjacent properties. We have 97 feet from the buildings 7 through 10 separated from the property line along the north. We have 98 feet from building number 6 to the western property line. We have 147 feet from buildings 4 and 3 from the southern property line. And just north of our commercial parcel along North Park, that is the hospital property, which during their presentation, they had said that that property was going to remain vacant. This is the PD plan, and these are the building areas where the 30-foot separation is being requested from the 40-foot requirement in the regulations. This is the typical elevation for the property.
That might be a good time for me to ask.
Sure.
What's 3-story and what's 4-story? Everything, is everything like that?
We're not sure which building type they may put in. As Robin mentioned,
I
the
know.
building height is 65 feet.
I understand.
And, right
So
now, we're not sure which
okay.
they may put in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you like to?
Yes, so you want to speak to that matter?
Do you want to?
Todd Taylor, and
Yes,
has been sworn in already.
Yes, sir, Mr. Taylor.
The initial building, the first building that you come into where the leasing center is,
Right.
the fitness center and complex will be on the first floor with the leasing, and then 3 apartments upstairs. So the
That's
only
what-
building that would be 4-story would be the first building coming in.
That's what I
The rest of
understood.
them will be 3-story.
The rest of them will be 3-story.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
This is a graphic of the entrance to the development. So as you're driving in, what you may see as you're coming into the development. Phillips Development, which is, potentially the ultimate builder for these apartment complexes. This is a typical pool area that they develop in their apartment complexes. So behind the clubhouse, with the first building that you encounter with the pool area, this is a typical scenario that you may see within this development. This is a typical fitness center that they place within their apartment complexes. This is a pickleball court that we had talked about placing within the recreational area to the west of the lake with, next to the pavilion. And this is a covered pavilion that would be a typical scenario to go within the dog park up in the northwest corner of the property. And if you have any questions, we are available for you. Oh, certainly, Mr. Taylor.
Todd Taylor again. One of the questions that you asked about the developer's done 17 multifamily projects around the United States, Texas, Tampa, and North Carolina. 6 of those projects, well, actually 9 of those projects were HUD developments. The 2 principals with the company is Don Phillips, who's been in the real estate business for 36 years, and his CFO, COO, which is Kevin Johnston, and Kevin's been doing this work for 32 years.
You said Don Phillips?
Don Phillips?
Local Don Phillips?
Well, how local?
Oh, okay. No, there's one, there's a man in Tampa named, that is a developer.
In
but-
Tampa.
Yes, sir. That's not him.
Yeah, that's him.
Oh, it's him.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And Philip and Don and I have done a project before 17, 18 years ago. It's been a while, but we've been friends. He's done over $700 million worth of apartment complex. And Kevin, his chief operating officer, is has a MBA and is a retired colonel from the Air Force and is very hands-on. So the renderings that you saw was one of the questions that you had previously was about the rec facilities. So state-of-the-art fitness center inside the 4-story building. The pickleball courts is the new hot thing. So sticking basketball courts on a pickleball court is also something that's able to do. Dog park, we've been very cognizant to be aware of the open space that's available, walking trails. There will be sidewalks. And the nice thing about this is that most people that return home at the end of the day that live in apartment complexes don't venture out to go to a fitness center. They've got everything right in-house so that there will not be additional traffic on the roads. And the great thing about the location here, with the hospital being across the street and quite a few employees, looking for temporary housing, whether they're moving into the market or not, they'll be able to walk to work. And whatever commercial development gets developed along Park and Sam Allen at the corner there, everything's within walking distance. So we're going to be able to alleviate putting traffic on the road also. Any questions that hopefully I answered what you had. I apologize again for us not having a better layout last time to show you where the parking was going to go and where the roadway.
Yeah, I just think there was some trouble visualizing.
No,
what you were
and
saying.
I appreciate that. I did too. Remember, I stood up here and I couldn't tell myself, and that was
Yeah.
my mistake.
Is there going to be dumpsters located for these units?
Oh yeah, there's a compactor. It's.
As I see a compactor on the drawing on the bottom right
Yeah,
corner.
that's where that'll be.
So if someone from building 2 wants to reach that, is that where they put their garbage? Is that what you're suggesting?
But that will be adjusted in the site development plan. So whatever, if you need one at the northwest section or the southeast section, that's something that we could manipulate somewhat.
Okay,
Like I said, they've done 17 of these, so
yeah.
they're pretty well aware of how that works.
The wetlands that's depicted here, are they underwater, have water in them 12 months of the?
No, if we went out there today, there wouldn't be a drop.
But they're-
Um,
So they're,
And I think I mentioned last time, when it was farmed 100 years ago or whatever, the farmer at that time put an upland swale through to alleviate any of the water that was sitting so the cows wouldn't get stuck on the property. And we've had EPC out there. We've got an EPC permit. We've had it permitted. Originally it was permitted 16 years ago. EPC permit lasts for 6 years. So we went out and had EPC walk the site with our environmentalists. And the lines that you depicted, or see depicted, is what is on their plans and is approved.
so the folks that live in building 2, if they wanted to get to building 1, is there going to be a land bridge over the wetlands for them to say like to reach the recreation center, are they gonna have to loop all the way around? I'm trying to understand how impervious that.
They're gonna have to go all the way around. Yeah, there's no intent right now. Now, that's a good idea. You know, possibly building a wood bridge across and walk across. But right now, they would have to go around to get to building one. But that's the norm in a lot of apartment complexes. They don't have a total thoroughfare through it. There is a cul-de-sac of some sort.
Okay, thank you. May I ask board members, do you have any questions? Mr. Burris, do you have any questions?
No, I'll just say that the original,
You'll have to go louder, Mr. Burris.
sorry about that. I will tell you that I like the layout now, seeing the parking lot structures and whatnot. Art, I think you brought up a good point with the bridge a moment ago, but I definitely feel more comfortable with this project now, knowing where the parking spaces are going to be. And quite frankly, I was expecting to see less green space this morning than what we're seeing on this. So I kind of been liking what I see so far.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? No? Seeing no questions. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask for any public comment at this point, any citizens input? Anyone here? I'll ask a second time, any citizens public comment at this point? Okay, that closes the public comment. Any further comments to add from staff? No further comments? All right, well, thank you. We'll close it in discussion. Anyone have a?
If I could,
Yes,
Chair.
Yes.
So just a couple comments and then a question. I agree with Mr. Burris. I think this definitely helps to see this, and it looks like there's some sidewalk opportunity. There's a walking path. Just the fact that we now know that there will be a pool. I don't know that we even knew that maybe before. So definitely gives the residents some options and opportunities to utilize the space and not be out on roads that we talked about before. So I think that's good. One question we talked a little bit about, what we're basically approving is the PD, which isn't as in depth as this.
Correct.
And I think Ms. Baker referenced somehow having this be inclusive in that. I don't know how that would. I guess that's my question: is how would that potentially look if we would like to say, hey, how close could this be to what we're actually approving or be attached, and just open that back up to you, Ms. Baker.
I guess your concern is that you might go out there after it's finished and the parking lot would be different.
I don't think
than
the
what's
parking,
depicted?
not so much the parking, because I think the ingress and egress is labeled on the PD.
Yeah.
There's really no other way to do
Right.
it. But just seeing, some of the specific things here, I didn't know if that could be included or if we're just, approving this and certain things aren't referenced. So just a question.
Can you reference exactly what's not on one or what's on the exhibit that is not on the PD?
Recreation area with pools on.
Yeah, that's probably the most significant. It looks like everything else really is there.
Okay.
And then obviously, once they're into the project, they could make small changes to the parking areas, but I don't see how much they could really change. So it's really just to ask the question. It's not a deal killer.
We could certainly request that they label that recreation. I don't know if you have to make that part of the motion, and obviously it changes before we go to city commission.
It does currently say recreation area, but it doesn't say with a pool, and I think that's what his comment was. Also, the elevations were not specifically incorporated by reference. That's part of the, I would think that would be something also that you were looking at that you want to have incorporated.
You're talking about the elevations of the actual
The
apartments?
buildings,
Yeah.
they would have to be substantially similar
Okay.
to that. They don't have to be identical, but they have to be substantially similar, which is the same standard we use for other buildings in PD.
So maybe add a note referencing the renderings that were submitted on a specific date, and then add that the pool will be included in the recreation area.
Right.
How about pickleball? No, I'm semi-serious, because where do we stop?
I mean, and I think again, the recreational area over here is mentioned on both. And so I think as long as there's something there gives, given the residents an option, I think I'm okay with that. But
You have a few things. I'm looking at it.
Walking path,
is not on there. The top lot is not on there. I mean, the point is that the drawing that you have here, if you just take it as it is, it's not part of.
I understand.
Right.
So they could develop any other way. If there's something you specifically want to be in the PD, you need to say so.
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable drilling down into, amenities.
Yeah, I think that might be a bit
So
much.
I don't know where, I was kind of
Right.
joking to you a little bit ago, but I'm serious also with the joke that
Mhm.
I don't know quite where to draw the line. If we say we would like to have a pool, then what about the walking path? What about
Maybe
the
the,
pickleball?
maybe the elevation discussion is maybe more relevant in that, but it really, also too, it's just for future understanding, as well, not specific to just this project, but.
The plan development process is slightly different because it is site plan controlled, and so it does allow you to see the layout of the site.
Mhm.
But, for zoning specific reasons, and what we're doing here today is about the use on the property and what's
Right.
allowed. Now, obviously, if we get into design, there are specific things that are, I guess, because I think about it in the sense of, Mr. Taylor is a developer. He's not necessarily going to build the apartments. He may, but he may not.
Right.
And if he sells this property to someone else that is going to build the buildings, but they decide they want to do something different, obviously, if there's deal breakers for you all, then they need to be on the site plan. Because if they have to come back and ask for an amendment to the PD because of the pool or whatever, at least at that point, what a deal breaker was for you. If it's a deal breaker, it needs to be on the site plan.
So just to further that discussion, these 12 buildings with this retention area and the ingress egress labeled where it is, that's kind of locked in based on an approval that could come today.
It is. The only
Even
thing-
if, to your point, if someone else were to come in and want to make major changes to that, then that would come back before this board.
Major changes in the sense of, because there's a fine line there.
Okay.
If they were to reduce the intensity, then they wouldn't necessarily have to come back before this board. That could be an administrative approval. If they were to reduce the amount of buildings, then obviously it's gonna look a little different. But if that is something that staff could approve, it wouldn't necessarily come back before you.
Okay.
Other changes, like, again, if you want something committing to, let's just use pickleball as an example. And they come back and don't want to provide pickleball, it's going to come before this board.
Yeah, I
That's
don't-
not an administrative approval.
Yeah.
But as far as reduction of buildings or change of layout because of reduction, then that could potentially be an administrative approval, not before the board.
Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome.
So where are we at with your thought on that? Do you want something to be required?
Not based on that explanation, no.
Okay. Recognize Ms. Carr?
Yeah, I guess one of the things, and I want to make sure I understand this, Robin. For example, they could not come back and take the area that's designated as recreation park and add a building.
Correct.
Okay. So when one of our major concerns was the quality of life for the residents and the availability to stay within the development and have that recreation. So the areas that are designated for that, or the open and green space, that is a part of the PD. And if they were to reduce that area, not the specific amenities that go there, they would have to come back to the board. So the
Correct.
space would.
Those types of
Would be-
things, absolutely.
Oh.
Because I believe it says specifically in the code, if there's a reduction of open space, they would have to come back for a major modification.
Okay.
We were just talking about a reduction in intensity.
Mm.
So if they reduce the number of units, and even buildings for that matter. I'm trying to think, for me personally, as a planner for the city of Plant City, if somebody comes in with a PD plan and they're gonna remove something that was originally approved, I'm gonna come back to this audio and I'm gonna listen to it. And I'm gonna listen to see what the board said, what they wanted, if there were any citizen comments, what they wanted, to make sure that those things that they're trying to remove were not detrimental to the approval of that project. So yeah, anything that is approved specifically as part of this, any reduction of open space, if we get specific about recreation amenities, then any change to that would be a major modification that would come back before the board.
Mr. Jones, any comments? How many, if it's built the way it's proposed, 3 stories, except for the 4-story building number 1, how many units would that deliver compared to the cap that's on the property? Do you have that?
No idea.
If memory serves me, Art, it was 282.
282?
92.
290?
Yeah.
Wow, I give you a lot of credit. I'm gonna be careful around you from now on. If your memory is that good. And how, 292, and how many is allowable?
340.
340.
That's just basically calculating the acreage time.
Yeah, I realize that. Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. I mentioned this at the last meeting, the waiver of the 40-foot rule. I mean, I was okay with that as long as I understood that they were going to be 3-story buildings, because there was the implication that, okay, we'll make it 40, but we'll go 4 stories instead. When I consider that a negative, I'd rather have a lower building, lower profile. But as we're approving it, they could, within the approval we're granted, make some of these buildings, or as many as possible, 4 stories, couldn't they?
They could.
Okay. Okay.
But not to exceed 65 feet in height.
Correct.
Right. Well, I'm not crazy about that, but I think we got to stay within the rules. So, yeah. Any other?
You could make that a note
Yeah.
if that's what the developer would agree to, because that's what he's representing.
Right. And that's what we talk about. If it's a deal killer, it needs to be a note on the plan. But I would say this. Let's just say that they were going to increase to 4 stories, but reduce the amount of buildings. And so now all of the 4 stories are not located where all those are, scenarios like that can happen. You just don't know until you get to the site plan review process. But yes, if 4 stories other than the main building is important to you, then it should be a note on the plan. Otherwise, they can go up to 65 feet.
Okay. Well, it's not a deal killer, but it's, yes, sir. Chair, would you come forward?
This is what I just said to Todd.
Yes, sir, Mr. Taylor.
In relationship to the buildings, I mentioned last time that we were cognizant of the neighbors. So with the 340 units, we could go to all 4-story buildings.
Mm-hmm.
But we, as developers, realize that 3-story looks a little bit better. It's better for the neighbors. And so we're keeping it at the 3-story buildings. We could take them all to 4-story and get the 340 units. But in land planning, talking with amongst ourselves, and like I said, them having done 17 projects before, decided to do the 3-story buildings except for the initial building that you come in, which would be 4-story. So we have the opportunity to do that, but the plans are to do the 292 and keep the 3-story. And again, we moved the buildings back off of the property as Linda had mentioned before. We've kept quite a bit of distance from the neighboring properties to keep the buildings away from them. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I guess while you're there, my concern is sort of intangible in that you're the first big project, first apartment project to come in after the hospital approval. So we're sort of breaking ice here with you.
Okay.
And if we make exceptions with you, like for the 30-foot, then the next group will come along. So we want those, plus we want something else. And suddenly we have a jungle up there
Yeah.
instead of the plan like we hoped for. I know that might not evolve, but you're under sort of extra scrutiny, and I have extra concern because you're the first.
Sure.
Yeah.
I understand that. Well, that's why I mentioned to you before that we, through the code, we could go to the 4 stories, but we're leaving it at 3 stories. And we actually had this under plans prior to the announcement of the hospital. So it was a plan to build that project also. And then with the hospital there, again, with the amount of employees that they'll be having, keeping the fitness centers inside, the recreation areas confined into the apartment site, and being able to walk to work, you know, it's going to be a big plus for employees there.
Good. Thank you.
Question, from what I'm hearing, then, can we just, to help everyone feel better, can we put a note in there, keep it at 3 stories?
Well, I'm hearing, we'd like to keep it just what it is, but
I understand you want to keep it that, you could sell this off, so anything could happen in the future.
because I've been through
Through
plenty of
this.
wars in 40 years of doing this, so yes. Since it's in your code, I'd hate to restrict it to that. You know, when we talk about the 30-foot setback and everything, and I had mentioned to you before, we could take out a building and build 5 or 6 of them 4-story, but that's you're gonna go up that other 20 feet next to it, and plans are not to do that. I mean, we are long into developing the project, you know, as far as conceptualized and doing the engineering on it. And so those are the plans. I'd like not to.
Mr. Taylor, wasn't that part of the justification for the waiver from 40 to 30 feet, is that you were going to go from four stories to 3 stories?
That's right.
Well, aren't you asking for the waiver from this board?
That wasn't part of the justification. Part of the justification was to create more open space. We never agreed to a reduction to. But so it's just been an overall height.
Yeah, when we had the meeting and you were in the meeting, we talked about benches, more landscaping, more open spaces.
Okay, I just misunderstood. I thought that's what you're explaining to the board is that at the last meeting in particular where you were saying that was the justification.
Well, what I said was that we're asking for it, but we could always go to 4-story if we had to. If you wanted to 40 feet, then we'd lose a building and we could go wider, but we'd have to go higher with it, 3 or 4 buildings.
But on the
You
other
could go
hand,
to 40 anyway, is what you're saying. You don't want to have that restriction on your site plan. So even with 30 feet, you could still go up to 40. Just 4 stories.
If we go,
Yeah,
40, if we go 4 stories.
Right, and I think Mr. Jones is correct. Obviously, you could sell the property. We've had that happen where development's been approved without certain restrictions, gets sold to somebody else, and then all of a sudden they do something that's within the meaning of the notes, whatever's there, but not with what was represented at the when it came before the planning board or city commission. So unless it's in a note, and I think that's true with the elevations too. I mean, you know, you have represented to this board that there's certain elevations.
Correct, yes.
And that's currently not incorporated in the PD. So if the board wants to have those things, I understand you don't want to have all the things about the swimming pool and the like, but certain things are I think are critical from what I understand that y'all have heard, like the 3-story, 4-story issues about the elevation and that it be you know, substantially similar to what ultimately gets developed.
I like it. I'm concerned that we're going to vote on something and I'm going to say yes, you know, recommend something.
Right.
That's going to change.
Right.
And I don't want that to come back and change. I trust you 100%.
No,
I just
I
know how
understand.
projects do change. They change hands and things are unforeseen and this could easily change in someone else's hands. And again, if we don't have that in there, who's to say they're not going to change it? So I trust you. It's nothing against you.
Okay.
I just know a lot of projects change.
Sure, no, I understand. Having done this, like I said, for 40 years, I've seen quite a few changes. Isn't this a rezoning modification? Isn't that what we're talking about? So the chances is that I could sell to somebody else. Plans are not to, but things change. So I don't want to, the plans are not to, you know, like I said, we could go to 340 units if we did all 4 stories, but we chose to do the 3-story building and ask for the setback requirement, which is kind of what we were, you know, mostly aimed at. You know, to be restricted to 292, it'd be like if you owned a car dealership and you can only sell 5 cars a week. Okay, you can't sell 6. I mean, that's kind of a broad, I know it's not really relevant to this, but that's kind of a broad statement. So my thought was if this was a rezoning and not a site-specific plan, when we present our plans to staff to go through the site design, then that will all be laid out in there. So I understand what you want to limit it to the 292 and I'm trying to keep the 340 open. If we do the 292, that's fine with me. And if it's not fine with Linda, she's my planner. But for me as a developer, I'm trying to work with everybody and make everybody happy. So if you want to limit it to the 3-story buildings, as long as we get the setback, reduced to the 30 feet, I can live with that. I know she doesn't want me to, but it's my baby, so.
Again, and I understand your comment a moment ago about this being a rezoning, but again, you're subject to more scrutiny because
No, I understand that.
you're
I
breaking the
appreciate
mold
that.
here.
Sure, no, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Well, that, and we have had projects change
Yeah.
and didn't think it through in the beginning.
Sure,
I'm gonna think this one through.
sure.
And hearing you talk, again, this could change hands. I totally trust you.
Uh-huh.
I'm worried this would change hands, and if we don't bring this up, again, if somebody does 4-story later after it changes hands, I'm gonna be bothered by it.
Okay.
But
Let me
3-story
leave-
makes sense to me.
If you want to add that note to that, I have no problem with that. And if something happens in the future, whether it be with me or my family, being able to come back and if they want to request a 4-story, then you can turn it down at that time. So I don't have a problem with it.
Linda's dying to comment, I believe. So
But, yeah.
I understand. She said she's being paid by you.
Beat 'em
So
up in the parking lot, that's all.
Doing her job.
Yeah. She's trying to protect.
I personally raised the 3-story issue versus 4-story stuff, so I need to know how the other board members feel about that issue.
I agree. This is unique and it is setting, as Plant City grows, more people move in, the types of housing change. To me, the 3-story is important.
Okay.
Because I think we are still trying to mesh the current community with the future growth.
Right.
And I am concerned, and I think I mentioned this last time with the hospital, that the hospital not set the entire tone for
Right.
the community of Plant City.
That's my
And,
concern.
yeah, I'm not sure how tall, I guess the tallest building in the hospital's development is, okay. So that's, yeah, so I would prefer the 3-story.
Your thoughts, Mr. Thurston? Either way, one way or the other?
I would be amenable to either, but I think, to Jason's point that, protecting, kind of down the road, if that's important to this board, I'm certainly willing to agree.
I'd also like to address the 30 feet waiver. In this case, it's, I think, less than 50% of the buildings that are being constructed. If someone comes later and says, you've done 30 feet before, and I want that across the board, I'd also like to see it noted that the reduction was to enhance the open space for this development so that we have something in the future to rest on that, why we did this.
Did it for a good
Yes,
reason.
not that we are just overriding what we've got established already. So I'd like that note also.
Yeah, and as Robin had mentioned earlier, if it was a different zoning type, the R2, it'd be a 20-foot side yard versus the PD, which it was originally a community unit development district, which was changed to a PD.
But it's not an R2. I mean, it's
No, I
much
understand.
bigger.
Right.
That makes sense. And we are making those, if we approve it, if we recommend approval, we're good with the 30, we're recommending, we're fine with the 30-foot waiver.
Right.
And again, I like the recreation areas, I like the layout now. There's a lot of light. I just, again, just want
Sure,
to
no,
protect
I
this.
I appreciate that. So I agree that, adding a note would be fine. And also, as Linda had mentioned, the overall distance between the buildings is 54 feet. So some of them are 80 feet, it's just because of the layout and configuration, putting the lake the way it is.
I understand what
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I do.
thank you. Yes, I'm sure it's,
No, that's Robin.
Plan City's gonna love having a project there. It's gonna be a very quality project, so, okay.
Yeah, I've got a comment too about the open space. I started thinking about it. I mean, we're moving the buildings closer together, which decreases open space in order to say that we're increasing open space. So,
Well,
you know what I mean? There's a little bit of screwy logic there.
buildings, but
Yeah.
we're creating more open space in general
Yeah.
for the use of,
Yeah, which,
bigger population.
yeah, and I only mention it because, like you say, if it comes up with the next person to try to understand what we mean, I mean, we're losing open space by moving the buildings closer together, but the other hand, we're saying we're doing it because we want to increase open space. So,
Yeah, I think it depends on how we describe it, because
Yeah.
what I would expect, or I think suggest, is that we're approving the reduction in space between certain buildings to create more open space in the overall development
Yeah.
and use of areas for
Yeah.
recreation.
yeah, just,
So I don't know if all that wording has to go in there, but I think it has to be worded to say why we're doing it there. And that's my concern, because otherwise it's just in general, we did it for.
But yeah, I mean, I had the same thought, shrinking up doesn't make sense, but then when you look at the layout, it does make sense because there's more room for the pickleball area.
that's what, yeah, it's sort of, I don't know what the correct space word is.
Yeah.
It's not merely open space because we're losing space to make space. So,
Okay, so just to clarify, we're not increasing open space, we're increasing recreational opportunities. Okay, so, in our former codes, we talked about usable open space. So we're not talking about that they increased acreage of open space or anything
No,
like that.
it's just open space is a fixed number in this case.
Correct.
We're just changing how okay.
Right, the applicant's justification was that they were able to provide a trail around the
Right.
pond, benches, the pavilion, the different types of recreation
The dog
amenities that were
park
allowed.
and so on. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the other
So,
comment. I just
Bonnie,
wanted
do you understand the distinction we
Yeah,
want?
yeah, right, and I
so-
think that's wording, which, again, I'm not sure with the specific wording, but I just want to make sure that we justify why we are doing this. And
Yeah.
that is, it's focused on the lifestyle,
Yeah.
that we're trying to create within this development.
Okay,
Because if we have more developments like this, we don't want somebody just saying, 30 feet and we're done. And they're not enhancing
okay.
the recreation.
So to sort of summarize, I know you want to say some more, but to sort of summarize that, we're allowing the buildings to be closer together in order to create more recreational opportunities.
Okay, yeah,
You understand
that's
that?
exactly.
Okay.
And just the other thing I wanted to point out on the other note, as far as the limitation of 3 versus 4 stories, we just need to make sure that that 65 feet is still allowed for that one building, or be worded in such a way that, 65 feet or 3 stories, except where recreational amenities are located on the bottom floor, where it'll be allowed to be 4
True.
stories, or something
True.
like that.
True, because we are acknowledging there will be a 4-story building.
Correct.
Okay,
Just
okay.
wanted to make sure.
Hey, Art.
Up for the clubhouse.
Okay, I'm gonna recognize Mr. Burris. You want to speak?
Yes, sir, I do. I just want clarity that I understand there'll be a 4-story building. And I appreciate Robin's note on that. I've been listening. But all the other buildings, just because they're not 4 stories, I just want clarity that they could be 3-story buildings, but is there anything that prevents the height? I know we can have a 3-story building, but it may be 50 feet tall or 60 feet tall. Are we going to restrict the height on these 3-story buildings? Because that's a concern for me too. It's not just 4 stories, but the height. So these other buildings, are we going to limit the height of them in this? I'm going to make sure I'm following that correctly.
So I'll ask Robin to clarify. If we choose to limit the, I guess, how many buildings is it? 12, if we choose limit 11 buildings to 3 stories, how do we phrase that to where they don't make the ceiling height 12 feet in each unit or something like that? I guess that's Mr. Burris.
Correct. Yes, sir. Yeah, correct. I mean, they could have, for example, I don't know, for example, 4 stories could be, say, 70 feet, but they only make these 3 stories and it's still 70 feet tall. To your point, to have that big, tall architecture, I think what we're trying to do is also limit our skyline a little bit to complement the community. So I just want clarity on that. Thank you, Mr. Wood.
It's a hard question to answer because everybody's different. Even if they did provide 12-foot ceilings, you're still only talking about 36 feet for the actual 3 floors plus the roof. I don't know what that roof looks like. Okay,
Yeah,
so it's
yeah.
hard for me to determine. If you want to limit the height of the structures, then again, we could word it to say that the height is limited to 60 feet, except where recreational amenities are located on the bottom floor, then it can be up to 65 feet or, you know, whatever that number is. But I don't know what to tell you what that number is. Because, you know, I wouldn't mind having an apartment with a 12-foot ceiling.
Right.
But, you know, it just depends on the builder and what their normal product is. Those renderings that were submitted as part of the packet probably show measurements on there of exactly what it is. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head.
Which is why those renderings, I'm recommending that also be included as part of the approval. That be included in the PD because that would answer the questions. 3-story buildings by its very nature is only going to get so high. You know, it's hard for me to picture that it would get up to 65, but I guess if it did, but this architectural renderings will tell you because it would have to be substantially similar to that. So. And that's something that the board will have to consider. Do you want to include that as part of your recommendation?
Is that back to the elevations issue?
Yeah,
Okay,
the building elevations, which were submitted to you
Okay.
as part of the presentation.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to discuss the elevations as a separate item. So we'll just stay focused for the moment and we'll move on to the elevations. So is it the consensus of the group that we want a notation about 3 stories for everything except the clubhouse building?
Yeah. Yes.
Does that need a separate motion or is that just automatic?
No, let's include
You
that.
can make the motion now and then include that. That we just included.
We just do one motion that includes all.
We can do it.
Yeah.
Do all that.
Do all of it in one
Yeah,
motion.
one big motion. Be fine.
Okay, so we have did you want to comment, Madam Clerk?
So I would have the motion here. I have it motion with note that the 30-foot space between buildings was approved to obtain more recreational opportunities and that the buildings do not exceed 3 stories with the exception of the recreational building.
Actually, it's really worded very well.
That's good.
Actually, based on that, I would recommend you go ahead and have that motion.
Very good.
Offices also, because in the 4-story buildings, it's going to be offices and the recreation.
Oh,
Okay, recreational and office buildings. Leasing office? I'm going to read it one more,
Talk about elevations.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm going to read it one more time for you.
yes, please.
Motion with note that the 30-foot space between buildings was approved to obtain more recreational opportunities and that the buildings do not exceed 3 stories with the exception of the recreational and leasing buildings.
Mr. Taylor, is that, at least that covers it?
Recreationally, wasn't that just the clubhouse? Is that what you're referring to?
There's
Yeah.
offices there.
He was saying that they're going to have offices in that building as
Right.
well.
You refer to recreational, what did you refer to at the end?
The clubhouse would suffice.
Yeah, that's what, it's that word, recreational city clubhouse.
I have recreational.
It should be clubhouse.
Should be clubhouse.
Should be clubhouse?
Correct. Technically, you can put a gym in each unit, raise it up.
Read it back and I'll ask somebody to make the motion, but read it back what the motion is.
Motion with note that 30-foot space between buildings was approved to obtain more recreational opportunities and that the buildings do not exceed 3 stories with the exception of the clubhouse and leasing buildings.
Leasing building.
Building.
Okay. We have a motion. Does someone wish to make the motion?
Not if we have to repeat that.
No, you don't.
Okay, then I move.
You don't have it memorized? Well, Mr. Thurston has it memorized.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion by Bonnie and a second. Is there any further discussion of the motion? Madam Clerk, would you call for the vote?
Yes. Board Member Wood,
Yes.
Board Member Burris,
Yes.
Board Member Carr,
Yes.
Board Member Thurston,
Yes.
Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion carries. We've had discussion here about the elevations and wanting, and I want to make sure there's clarity exactly what is meant by that word, elevations.
In the PD ordinance, we refer to like the architectural renderings or the building elevations. There was some slides that showed two, examples of the height. And I think that would resolve a lot of the issues that are being raised about the height of a three-story building. And the requirement would be that maybe a note that, first of all, it'd have to be attached to it and incorporated into the PD, but also that the buildings be substantially similar. They don't have to be exact. I mean, change a window or whatever, but they have to be substantially similar. And specifically, we'd be talking about the height is what you would expect, things like that. That's a decision that this board has to make. I mean, it's not my call. It's yours to see whether you would want to include that. But I think you're looking, there's a certain look that you're expecting,
Right.
and if the building could be, if it was substantially different, then that way you'd be able to reconsider that at some other meeting. But essentially, that's what they're presenting to you. So you want to make sure that.
So if you had to craft the motion, what would it say?
Well, first of all, you want to find out if the developer is willing to add a note to incorporate those architectural renderings.
Well,
But a motion would be.
I want all of us to understand what we're.
Okay, a motion to incorporate the submitted building elevations into the PD and require that the development of the buildings be substantially similar to the building elevations submitted.
I'm going to see if you have that correct, and then we'll.
So I'm going to go ahead and add an item with regards to the building heights, the building's height.
No, I'm talking about the elevations because that covers the height in there. It had the proposed height in it.
Building elevation.
There was one slide that showed 4-story, I think, and a 3-story.
Right.
Right.
And that made.
Let me craft the motion, and then we'll discuss.
So I have
Didn't
to,
those elevations show the height of both?
They do.
Yeah, okay.
so I have to add the item first and then I'll put in the motion. So the item that I'm adding is building elevation. Okay. And now the motion.
Motion to move to incorporate building elevations submitted by the developer into the PD.
Motion to move to incorporate building.
Building
elevation.
elevations submitted by the developer into the PD and to require the buildings constructed to be substantially similar
Do the record.
to the building elevation submitted.
I'm sorry, buildings constructed.
To be similar
To be
to.
substantially similar.
Thank you.
To be substantially similar.
To the building elevation submitted.
Building elevation.
Building elevation submitted.
I'm gonna read it back to you. Motion to move to incorporate building elevations submitted by the developer into the PD and to require the buildings constructed to be substantially similar to the building elevation submitted.
Yep. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Taylor. Yes, sir. This is still open for discussion. I was just crafting the motion so that we knew what we were discussing. Everybody. So yes, sir. Any comments are welcome.
My only comment was, and Ken said it distinctly, substantial. So-
Yes, sir.
So I
Clearly.
don't know whether it's going to be 2 feet different. 1 foot.
Exactly.
It's not going to be.
Maybe on the left side instead of the right side. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. We all get that? We all get that? Yep. Yes, sir.
No discussion.
Okay. Would someone like to make the motion?
I'll
As long
make,
as we don't have to say it again.
No, I don't even know if Ken could say it again.
I could say.
I'll make the motion to,
Mr. Thurston
to
makes
approve the elevation addition.
Motion, elevation motion.
I'll second.
And there's, okay, so we have Mr. Thurston motion, moving and Mr. Jones seconding. Any discussion of the motion? Madam Clerk, would you call for the vote?
Board Member Wood,
Yes.
Board Member Burris,
Yes.
Board Member Carr,
Yes.
Board Member Thurston,
Yes.
Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries. But we still have the item in front of us to move on the item. Is there any further discussion of the item, the continuation motion? This is for approval and for it to go forward to the commission.
I'll make a motion to approve PB 2021-06,
With
finding
those,
consistent with the plan
yes,
That's
sir.
modified.
as modified.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The as modified would be important.
Yes,
right?
as modified.
That'll include those two
I will
notes.
second it also.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? All right, Madam Clerk, if you're ready, you can call for the roll.
So I have a motion by Board Member Thurston and a second by Board Member Jones.
Yes, that's correct.
Board Member Wood,
Yes.
Board Member Burris,
Yes.
Board Member Carr,
Yes.
Board Member Thurston,
Yes.
Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next item up for discussion is PB 2021-03, North Park Isle. It's the Phase 1 final plat. And I guess that's the operative word, final plat. And the presenter, Ms. Baker, please.
Robin Baker, Senior Planner with the Planning and Zoning Division, and I have been sworn in. Our next case is PB 2021-03, which is for the North Park Isle Phase 1A final plat. The request is for a final plat for North Park Isle Phase 1A to create a 283-lot single-family residential subdivision with a waiver request to allow dead-end streets where future phases would connect. The site's located at the northwest corner of East Sam Allen Road and Maryland Avenue. It's approximately 363 acres, has a future land use of Red 6, and is part of the North Park Isle Plan Development District. It's not working. Try now. There we go. Planning Board saw the preliminary plat and was approved on July 13th, 2017. The construction plans were reviewed and approved by staff on January 29th, 2020. The construction is almost completed, the improvements that were required, the roads, water, sewer, retention ponds, etc. This is page 2 of 33. This is just kind of shows you the overall layout of the lots. Each of those individual sheets shown on that site plan get a little more site specific for that sheet, but just so you have an overall view of the plat. A waiver has been requested, as mentioned before, to allow dead-end streets in those areas that will connect to future phases in lieu of having to provide cul-de-sacs, which is what the code requires specifically for emergency vehicles and solid waste trucks. They have to have a way to turn around. The engineering department had no objections to this request. There were certain areas on the plat that I thought would be an issue. I'll go ahead and make the statement that if there are any lots served by dead-end streets, those lots would not be able to be issued certificates of occupancy, just simply because if emergency vehicles can't get there, that, you know, we're not going to issue certificates of occupancy. But according to the construction plans, all the areas that I thought were issues, they actually show cul-de-sacs in those areas. So this waiver is just specific for the plat itself, so they didn't have to show those cul-de-sacs on the plat. It just allowed them to show the dead-end streets on the plat. So the construction plans, as approved, should be totally fine for that maneuvering of those emergency trucks. This waiver was just for the plat. The project, as part of the PD, was required to provide a direct connection to McIntosh Park, which is located to the northwest of the property, by providing a pedestrian path within the development. And the applicant has provided in tract 101, which is the most northwestern portion of the site. They are showing a 14-foot public egress easement there on that side of the property. And then they're mentioning that tract in the dedication language to say, you know, what that is to be used for, and that it would be dedicated to the public, but it would be maintained by the owner or future owner or CDD, HOA, all of the above. So staff has reviewed the final plat for North Park Isle Phase 1A subdivision for consistency with the technical requirements of Chapter 94, which is our subdivision regulations, Chapter 102, which is our zoning ordinance, the Imagine 2040 Plant City Comprehensive Plan, and Chapter 177, Part 1 of the Florida statutes, which deals with platting, and finds that the final plat be consistent with the above requirements for the final plat. Therefore, staff recommends that the planning board find the North Park Isle Phase 1A final plat consistent with the above noted technical requirements, and for the final plat and waiver request to be forwarded to the City Commission with a recommendation of approval. I'm here if you have any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Baker? Thank you. Does the applicant wish to speak? Please, Dana.
We don't have further presentation.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
So the applicant declined further presentation. Is there any citizen input, any public comments on the project? I'll ask one more time. Is there any citizen input, public comment on the project? Okay, that closes public comment. Anything further to add, staff? Anything? Okay, board discussion. We've got it now. We started on this, I don't know how long ago. So.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Were you here with the 2017 when we first approved the preliminary?
For my time, sir.
Oh. I'm testing your memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
You were, yeah, you remember that. That's been in the works. There's no further discussion? We'll call for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Can't have a vote till we
I
get
said
a
I'm
motion.
ready to make a motion.
You're ready to make the motion. I'm jumping ahead. So we'll take your motion.
Okay, thank you.
You're willing to ask for approval,
Yes.
consistent with so and so and yada yada?
I'm going to make a motion to recommend approval of PB 2021-03,
Yeah.
finding it consistent with the Imagine 2040, the Plant City Comprehensive Plan.
And forward it to the commission for approval.
Correct.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Wait a minute. I heard you,
Flip
Mike.
coin.
Mr. Thurston,
Good ear.
Mr. Thurston recorded the second.
Board Member Wood,
Yes.
Board Member Burris,
Yes.
Board Member Carr,
Yes.
Board Member Thurston,
Yes.
Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you all. Next item is also related to North Park Isle. It's PB 2021-19. It's a plan development modification. Ms. Baker, would you make your comments?
Sure, Robin Baker, planning and zoning, and I have been sworn in. This one's moving on its own. PB 2021-19, North Park Isle Plan Development Modification. The site is located north of the intersection of Sam Allen and Park Road, west of Wilder Road, has a future land use of residential with existing zoning on the property being planned development, Hillsborough County Agriculture Single Family 1, Agriculture Single Family Conventional 1, and Agriculture Rural. My favorite words. Yes, I can never say them correctly.
That's hard to say together. I never thought about it.
And just so you understand, any of those that are followed by the number 1, that allows 1 unit per acre, the rural allows 1 unit per 5 acres. So the first request in the modification is to modify the size and the density of the PD. So on this graphic, you see here the little orange shaded area in the southeast. Essentially, the applicant is requesting to add 23.64 acres to the project. And as part of that request, increasing the number of units from 2,500 to 2,600 units, which is an increase of 100 units. Based on the underlying land use, they could provide up to 6 units per acre, which would be over 140 units. So they're not requesting the max amount of units for this parcel, but they are requesting to increase by 100 units. So the other change to the actual PD is an increase in overall open space acreage. Now, this is something that staff would have been looking for as part of their recommendation of approval, because under the old code, the PD was required to produce an amount of, so much of it being usable open space in order to get a reduction of setbacks. We'll get into the specific approvals that are being asked for this particular village that's being added in just a moment. But they are increasing that acreage based on this added acreage. So they're going from 277 acres to 287 acres of open space. The applicant is requesting specific approvals just for what is we're calling Village 5, which is that addition of 23 acres. And the reason why is because, again, under the old code, they were allowed some of these things by adding additional open space and usable open space. Under the new code, we eliminated all of those allowances for reduced setbacks. So now they're having to ask for specific approvals for those things. So they're specifically asking for 5 specific approvals. The first one is to allow 30% of the lots to be 50 feet wide. So out of the 100 units, 30, if approved, would be 50 feet, and 70 would be 60 feet, which is what's required by the code. And then of those lots, allowing a side yard setback of 5 feet. Now, as mentioned in the prior slide, they are increasing that open space acreage, which is what they would have had to do under the old code to make everything match. So that's what they were doing to mitigate that impact of reducing the lot to 50 feet. The other 3 specific approvals are about driveway spacing. Now, in the past, these applicants would have had to go through a variance process for these driveway spacing variations. And basically, our code today requires that they provide a 60-foot spacing center to center for the driveways. And the problem that we've encountered with that is, even with our normal 60-foot wide lots, it requires the driveway to be in the same exact place on every single lot. And so we've had a lot of variance requests on this, because in order for them to provide that monotony control that we're asking for, they have to have the flexibility to be able to put the driveways in different locations. So now under our new PD code, they can ask for these variations to the code as part of this process. They won't have to go before the Board of Adjustment. But it's important to note that they did go to the Board of Adjustment for the rest of the property, and the variance was approved for all 3 of these requests. The first one being the center to center spacing down to 30 feet, 5 feet to the property line, and then allowing to be spaced 25 feet from the center of the driveway to the right-of-way line. Generally, that requirement is 50 feet, so they have to ask for that as part of this.
Quick question
Yes, sir.
on the side yard setback. So even if it's a 60-foot lot, there could be only 10 feet between the units if they so choose.
Correct. That's the way that it is on the rest of the project.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Okay.
So with all of that being mentioned, staff recommends the planning board find the modification to the North Park Isle Plan Development and specific approvals requested for Village 5 be found consistent with Article 4, Division 9 of Chapter 102 zoning of the Plant City Code of Ordinances and the Imagine 2040 Plant City Comprehensive Plan, and for it to be forwarded to the City Commission with a recommendation of approval. I'm here if you have any questions.
That additional parcel, I saw a picture of it. It looked like there was really no homes going on that additional parcel, because I saw it looked like a retention pond. inside of
There's
it?
a retention pond in the middle, but it is showing roadways around the outside there, so,
So there might be homes on that.
correct.
Okay, okay. I couldn't tell from the way it was drawn. Okay. Any,
I have one question.
one
Just
question?
right in that same area, it looks like there's like a little inset that's not a part of it. It's very
Correct.
narrow. What is that?
There's a piece of property there that is either currently or it's already been annexed into the city. This application was just filed prior to them being able to add it to the PD based on some agreements they made with the property owners. So we weren't able to add it under this PD, but they'll have to come in the future and add that piece if they plan to add it to the North Park Isle Plan Development District. But it is not included currently.
Different ownership?
Correct.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Ms. Becker. Would the applicant like to speak? Give us your name, address, and state for the record that you've
Yes,
been sworn in.
yes, sir. Elise Batzel, Stearns Weaver Miller, 401 East Jackson Street, and I have been sworn. I'm going to skip over just a few slides so that I don't duplicate some of the information that Robin's already presented to you. You know where the property is located. I did want to just note here, North Park Isles, of course, is in green. You can see the location of the Bay Care property here directly to the south. The area in red, I'm very much a visual person, so the area in red is this small piece that's being added in, the 23 acres. And you can also see across the street from Bay Care, that was the Todd Taylor property that you just approved.
Right.
Sorry, this is a little wacky today. We are adding up to 100 single-family dwellings on this property. So there will be homes located around the retention pond on that ring road. Robin did mention the specific approvals. I'll go into a little bit more detail because I think it'll be helpful for you to really understand those. And we are not changing the previously approved conditions. In other words, all of the same conditions with respect to architectural controls that were already part of North Park Isles will also be part of the homes within this 23 acres as well. This just shows you maybe a little clearer how this piece will integrate into the big overall North Park Isles. With respect to your question, Board Member Carr, that little piece, we wanted to bring it in at the same time, but unfortunately, we weren't able to align the sellers, but we'll be back for that little piece at some point.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that will be the last time we do this?
I don't know. So let's go back a minute.
We've been nibbled to death on this.
Yes. With a project of this size, so the idea is to kind of round out some of these properties.
Oh, I know. You'd like to have nice borders.
A big rectangle, right? So we may be back in. We're going to try to have as few rezonings as we can. Unfortunately, when you have different sellers and different contractual obligations,
I
it's
understand.
hard for us to.
But you are still trying to enlarge the property footprint. Do I understand?
Yeah. Maybe Steve, do you want to address that? I think it's probably better coming from Steve.
For the record, give us your name, address, and state that you've been sworn in.
My name is Steve Luce with Eisenhower Property Group, the applicant developer of the property, 111 South Armenia, Suite 201.
Yes, sir.
And I haven't. At the moment, we have no other properties besides that one small tract that Commissioner Carr brought up. That's the only other piece we have in the contract. Occasionally, we get brokers that are calling us because now they know who we are.
Yeah.
And have talked to us, but no serious discussions have led to any additional contracts at this time. Now, we are developers, this is what we do for a living, and so the folks out there are talking.
Okay, that's why I was wondering what
Nothing at the
was,
moment.
so just that one parcel possibly, or probably, yeah.
And I guess on that one parcel, now they're kind of boxed in
Correct.
because they were at the end of the development. So any other communications or anything from that property owner?
Commissioner, which, to the one that we just talked about?
Yeah.
We are in contract with them.
Oh, you
Yeah,
are?
yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
We already annexed that property.
Okay, I didn't know you annexed it. I didn't know
Yeah,
you were
we're
under
there.
contract. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Again, this is just a little bit of a blow up where you can see where the homes would actually be located around the retention pond. Just to talk a little bit more about the specific approvals, specifically with respect to the side yard setbacks. So one of the things that we discussed at length before this board, but also before City Commission, was sort of size and quality of homes. And these builders come in with sort of prototypical buildings, and they are every 10-foot increments. So for example, on a 50-foot lot, they would typically come in with a 40-foot product, but that requires 5-yard side setbacks because the next size down would be a 30-foot footprint, which is a much smaller home. And so the side yard setbacks allows the variation down to 5, allows the builder to come in and still maintain that size of home that this board and City Commission was looking for. They want that quality development. They don't want the sizes of the homes to be too small. And so that's another reason that we asked for the side yard setback waiver. Also, just a note for the record, along Wilder Road, all of those will be 60-foot lots, just for your information. And you have a provision in your new land development code that says at the entrances of properties, the smaller lots can't be at the entrances. So you won't see those 50-foot lots, the 30%. Of course, 70% will be 70-foot lots, assuming that you approve that specific approval. With respect to the driveways, if you have any questions, we can go into more detail on that, but I think Robin covered that very well.
Is the visual that there'll be a lot of variety in the way the driveways are positioned?
Right, so that.
You don't want boom, 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 boom.
Exactly, and that's exactly the reason for the request for the specific approval, is just to avoid.
I want to make sure I want to make sure I understood.
That's right, so they can alternate, right? And so you'll have maybe 2 with them on the outside, and then you'll have 2 internally, and that way it avoids that look, that aesthetic. From a compatibility standpoint, of course, it's internally compatible with the development because it's an add-on piece to that development, and it will connect directly with the existing North Park Aisle. It is separated on the eastern boundary by Wilder Road, so of course this provides a physical barrier to the properties that are across the road and additional compatibility. And the property to the south, which is vacant, will likely develop at a more intense use, just given the fact that it's right there in that commercial activity center. With respect to the comp plan, I'm not going into a lot of detail because this is in the staff report, but it does check a number of boxes with respect to consistency with a comprehensive plan, both because of the location of where it's located near the commercial activity center at Sam Allen and Park Road, land use policy 1.1.3, which does encourage the development of a wide variety of housing types, and land use policy 2.6.2, which talks about as appropriate to implement the recommendations and policy directions of the corridor and select study areas. This fits in within all of those boxes and checks those boxes. And that's the end of my presentation. We respectfully request your recommendation of approval. Steve and I are both here to answer any questions. Thank you for. Yes, sir.
I like the McIntosh part. I guess it's a part connection.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me a little bit more history on that?
Sure, that's been in the North Park Aisle original zoning even before Eisenhower purchased the property.
Okay.
And so that will be a trail, you know, like a pedestrian trail. And Ken and I worked extensively on some dedication language so that the public would have an easement to walk there. Now, there is a piece of property between North Park Isles and the park. And so at some point in time, the idea is that all of that would connect and you'll have a nice trail that connects all of that and pedestrians. I think there's one property owner in between.
So they will be able to walk to it, or that private property will block them?
There's one piece of private property right now that's in between, of course, that we don't control.
So you couldn't walk then to McIntosh?
Right now, you cannot. We've dedicated on our property the trail, and the hope would be that in the future, to the extent that property redevelops, then that would connect.
Okay.
That's correct. Well, actually, depending on which way you go, 2 different ones, but there's one particular one that basically separates one property that separates that from McIntosh Park. So all they can do is put a pedestrian
Up to that point.
Up to the point of their north property line, which is what their PD required.
Okay. So All right. So we're sort of building it as a connection to the McIntosh Park,
It's
but
like
it's,
Field
but
of
it's
Dreams.
not.
If you build it, they will come.
Right.
Yes.
There's a need for a further connection.
Okay, okay. So we got it, but we don't have it. Okay, I got it. I'm with
You
you.
got the piece we can control, you've got.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for applicant?
Thank you very much.
Did you want to add anything? Okay. Okay, concludes the applicant's comments. Is there any citizen input, any public comment on the proposal? I'll ask a second time. Any citizen input, public comment on the proposal? Okay, seeing none, it closes public comment. Robin, do you wish to add anything to the presentation? And you're satisfied? Board members, some discussion? We're splicing in a 23-acre parcel. Any discussion? Ready to move for, ready for someone to make a motion then? Who would like to move for the approval?
I'll make a motion to approve PB 2021-19, finding it consistent with the
Yep.
Vision 2020
And forwarding it to the,
plan and recommend it move forward to the commission with an approval.
thank you. That's Mr. Thirst's motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Burris will be recorded as a second. Any discussion of the motion? No? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Board Member Wood,
Yes.
Board Member Burris,
Yes.
Board Member Carr,
Yes.
Board Member Thurston,
Yes.
Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you all. Thank you. We have a little other business to come before the group today. 2 items that we generated internally was a notice discussion and a hybrid meeting discussion. And I would like to initiate that, but I'm not going to ask for a vote because we've got 2 board members that aren't present. And I'd like to have them here for this so we have a consensus. But Robin, would you, on the notice discussion, would you tell us where we're at on that? What information we have to discuss? I know this was generated by Mr. Burris a while back in terms of, was our notice adequate, especially on large parcels of land? So
Right.
where are we at on that? Yeah.
I mean, I'm prepared to make the presentation today,
Okay,
based on the information that was requested.
okay. Are you recommending that we expand the notice requirements over and above what we have presently?
I am not.
Okay,
I'm just giving information.
okay. You're not giving a recommendation or anything?
No.
Okay. Mr. Jeff?
Recommend we move this to another meeting. when we
Yeah.
have More board members.
That's my thinking. I would like to vote on, we have everybody present. Yeah,
Can I just make a?
Yes.
I'm not sure if the earlier discussion, I think it did, included increasing the physical signs on the property. Is that a part of this? Okay, okay, good.
Yeah,
that's part of
it
what
was
we
a-
discussed.
Okay.
Some different options that we could do. And that'll be part of the discussion for sure.
Okay, good.
all right. Thank you.
never know, I might just beef it up more between now.
That's what I'm
You
thinking.
never
really.
know.
And hybrid meeting discussion, we kicked that off last time. And the primary concern was the cost associated with holding a hybrid meeting. And I believe a number has been created. I saw it come out. Was it, who wants to, I think, Julie, will you mention that? It was like $1,200.
Yeah, $1,233.73 for the city clerks. That included the closed captioning, go to webinar talk, social media streaming, IT staff, city
Yeah.
clerk staff.
Is
So-
it per meeting?
Per meeting.
Per meeting.
Per meeting, if we hold
Okay.
a hybrid meeting.
Here's, how many people do we have on now?
We had 3 for the last meeting, I
About
believe.
10 viewers who watch it live.
Okay, for this meeting?
Correct.
So this kind of came up originally, Art, because the commission had gone to a full live or a full in-person, right? But is that maintained, or was that?
Well, the commission moved to the leaving the hybrid to in-person only because they had no public comment.
Right, but it wasn't, that's not a permanent arrangement.
No, sir.
Correct?
I'll let the impression I got was that if they, under other circumstances, they would have continued a hybrid, but where are they at? Do you know where they're at now?
Yeah,
Mr. City Attorney?
I would say in general, they're going to go from live meetings. Now that seems to be the consensus in what the mayor was saying. However, the mayor who under their procedure, just like you do with the sheriff, left open the possibility that under certain circumstances, they might allow for hybrid, but essentially the general rule is until that happens, it's going to be a live meeting. And I suspect there's not going to be very many circumstances where in the future that they would want to have a hybrid meeting, but they left it open, he left it open that they could. But I think the mayor's decision was to go in person from here on out, unless he says otherwise.
And I think,
There you go, Mark.
there you go. It says everything right there. It will be unless it isn't. And I think other city boards have moved towards in-person meetings. Am I correct, Julie? I think.
The Board of Adjustment has opted to have in-person meetings only. The Historic Resources Board has opted to leave it as hybrid.
Okay. And I threw it open last meeting to see if any of our shareholders, anyone, not just the public, but the attorneys or owners had any objection, and I've heard none. So does anybody come forward to you saying, okay. Well, if everybody will be present or close to it with our next meeting, which I guess is in 2 weeks, then I'd like to put this on the agenda for discussion to see if we could move. And let me clarify too, like Mr. Burris's case right now, you can attend an in-person meeting on the phone.
Correct.
Correct, Mr. City Attorney? Yeah. So this doesn't preclude whatever Mr. Burris needed, whatever reason Mr. Burris had to be away from this dais for this meeting, you can still do that, even if we have live in-person meetings. Yeah.
So what is the distinction? I mean, what's added? You could be on the
The
phone.
public, yeah.
It's the
public.
public and the live streaming.
And the
Okay,
applicant,
public.
the applicant, yeah.
Being able to see the presentation too. If someone just joins by phone, they can't see
Uh,
PowerPoints without whatever.
Yeah, and I would not want to do that because that would add substantially back to the cost, you know. So,
Is there an opposition to voting on this now, Art? Would you rather wait until we have a full board?
but I just don't know. We have 2 people. I'd rather wait till we have a full board. Yeah. But so that would mean the next meeting would be a hybrid meeting. But it might be our last. Yeah. Is that okay? I think I know which way the 2 of them will vote, but I don't want to assume. Yeah. Is that okay? So we discussed that long enough?
I think I know how most of us are going to vote, but I don't have a problem waiting.
Yeah. Just to put the whole thing out there and again, give any shareholders out there, whether not just the public, but the attorneys and so on, the opportunity if they object to let me know or let the staff know.
Basically, anybody listening, any of the 10 listeners, if you have any comments, just let
the staff know.
Before
Yeah.
next meeting.
Yeah, we're being.
Yeah, I mean, if we've got 10 people watching, $1,000, that's $100 a person watching.
We could charge. Then we probably have a lot less.
I thought movies were expensive, but $100 to watch this. So I think I know how we'll vote, but we'll definitely do it next time.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's a little more expensive than I would have.
I was surprised too. Yeah. And thanks, Julie, for the work on that number. All right, anything else to come before the board today? Yeah. Next meeting, 2 weeks? Full agenda again, you expect? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Have a good day. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.